Hello, good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you're watching this, and welcome to Painting with Stephen, episode 16. Yeah, we're really flying in now with these episodes. It's crazy to think that episode 16 is already upon us, but yeah, I think this is quite an exciting one. For once, I've actually thought of a name before I put the video out. So this one is called Tomb of the Defamed Philosopher, and it's a symbolist work, or a symbolist inspired work yet again. It really takes influence from Swiss painter Hermann Solu, I think that's how you pronounce his name, who himself was a copyist and who himself was deeply inspired with his sort of composition from Bocklin himself, one of the great symbolist painters. And he sort of definitely adapted the composition to fit a different style, and I think that's I've definitely taken some compositional aspects, others I've completely changed, but the idea is definitely, the essence is definitely there. In terms of the colours used and stuff, it's all completely different, but still very toned down, very ethereal, very ghostly, as symbolism should be. So, why have I chosen this theme? Well, I'm sort of on a bit of a tomb a tomb theme right now. My last painting was a tomb. This painting is a very different sort of tomb, more Greco-Roman inspired, antiquity inspired, classical architecture. But what I think is really interesting is thematically what this represents, because the reason, again, in my own little head, because most of my paintings are meant to be fantasy-esque. They are in other worlds, apart from our own. They are in a dream world of my making. I'm not painting something real here. I'm painting something symbolic, thematic, something that I can sort of explore my own concepts within, because that's why I like landscape painting so much. I like landscape painting because it gives you a place to not just explore themes like, for example, cultural decay or death or any of these things, but more also it gives you a place to imagine walking around, in your dreams, or sort of actually put yourself in. The reason I've chosen this sort of theme of the defamed philosopher is because I feel like it's a very poignant motif. Think Socrates getting put to death by the state, by being forced to take hemlock. And obviously the reason that he was forced to be put to death by hemlock is so that he would be aware of his body's decay while he was dying. That's the reason they chose hemlock as his poison, because hemlock basically paralyzes the body while the mind remains active, and so the mind is the last thing to go. So they thought it would be a fitting death for him as a philosopher to take hemlock, so that he was acutely aware of everything that was going on while he was dying. One of his charges was corrupting the young of Athens, which is interesting. I think here's the thing though, right, is that obviously, as George Orwell said, to speak the truth in a time of universal deceit is a revolutionary act. I think when we're getting into these times now, I think things are getting extremely polarised, and for good reason. There's a lot at stake. The future of Western society is most definitely at stake, and the way that we choose to go is going to have extremely important ramifications on the future generations. I'm a young guy, I'm 27, but you know, obviously I've seen the world change an irrevocable amount. You know, we're not going to be able to backpedal from the things that are happening. This is where the role of the philosopher and the artist in antiquity was a very important one, where it allows societies to self-reflect, right? Now, if you watch my Agora episode 1, the Agora is my more sort of philosophical video essay type series that I have on this channel. Realistically, the reason I called it Agora was so that I could speak about any topic. It's not restricting. So you know, it can be philosophy, psychology, theology, literature, art, whatever, science. You know, you name it. You know, I've got tons of Agora episodes lined up that I'm going to be firing out. I'm planning for maybe one a month. You know, I need to be realistic with the amount of time that it takes. But here's the thing, right? In Agora episode 1, I explore the concept of Carl Jung's archetypes, of needing symbolic sort of representation of our subconscious within our art, our religions, our societies. This is something that was very important in classical civilizations. This is something that was very important, you know, in the Greco-Roman world and the world of the pagan druids, you know, in classical Europe, you know, also within the perennial philosophies of Asia and South America. This is a very important thing. There was space for cultural reflection. There was space for art and philosophy and thinking to be recognised as something with high importance. The more and more we move into a world of essentially commercial slop, where things are, you know, made into content, down to, you know, because it's all reductionism, isn't it? You know, basically we have this reductionist society now where we're just meat sacks on a planet, and we just dither around, you know, doing what our biological purpose is, and everything is boiled down, so there's no higher meaning or purpose in anything. It's an awful way to live, but it's not just an awful way to live, it's untrue. And I think all of human history proves that it's untrue. And I think forcing, you know, I think Werner Herzog, this is really sort of funny, is that Werner Herzog once said that psychoanalysis was the worst thing that ever happened to humanity. Because it essentially takes the quizzical, the eccentric, the genius, the outcasts, you know, that could have done something great, and it slaps a label on them and tells them, you know, again using reductionism, no, you're just autistic, you've just got ADHD, you've got this, you've got that, and then, you know, a lot of the time medicates this individual and then takes away the special spark that they might have had in a society that just allowed them to be what they were going to be. Now, why am I painting the defamed philosopher? Well, much like Socrates, who was once, you know, an incredibly, you know, sought after thinker in Athens, and very, very highly respected. You know, basically when that window of acceptance for your ideas closes in on you, then you've got a big problem, right? Then all of a sudden you're a rogue, you're, a pariah, and then you'll eventually be societally cast aside, or even worse, you'll be made an example of, and they will come for you because the tides have shifted to a point where you are now essentially a enemy of the state, right? This is what happened to Socrates, and the thing is that I'm using this as just a motif, a symbolic motif for sort of thinkers in general. I think there's something really creepy and interesting and cool about a tomb that has just been left on this island just to sort of exist, that isn't really particularly, visited by anyone. The reason I used an island was because I wanted it to be isolated. I wanted it to be isolated in this symbolism. Islands obviously being cut off from the rest of mainstream society. This is what I wanted. This is the motif that I wanted to utilise. Also, I wanted the island to seem very still. Again, very creepy, very dreamlike, very ominous, very ethereal, very, so still that if you were walking into this space, your footsteps, your very, noise of breathing would feel like an affront on the stillness. That's what I want. And I wanted the tomb to be well kept because I wanted that to almost be like, again, this we were talking maybe a couple of episodes ago about gardens and a lot of the time kept places actually being really creepy in their own way, because there's this dreamlike stillness to them and this sort of intriguing sort of liminal aspect to them, right? I don't know how to describe it. It's a very, very poignant feeling. Last episode we were talking about how places of decay a lot of the time are presented in a horror-like environment, but this was more what I really wanted to do with this sort of symbolism was I wanted to have the tomb well kept, to make it seem like he still had this philosopher, to make it still seem like he had support, a following. This is what I wanted, because I want it to be like, just because most of society has shunned him, said that he can't be buried within, let's say, the bosom of the church sort of thing, the bosom of the kirk, you understand what I mean. Just because he can't be buried with mainstream society, and he's been put on this island somewhere, doesn't mean that he's been forgotten about by everyone. There's still a little, almost countercultural enclave of people that remember him, that care about him, that want him to have a legacy, that want to preserve that legacy. This is what I wanted to go for. This is the sort of the interesting motif that I wanted to play around with, that there's always going to be a segment of society see for example, when a majority win and their ideology takes hold, there's always going to be people that don't forget about the remnants of an old way that is lost, or the pendulum swinging the other way, for example. There's always going to be a countercultural group of people that are not going to forget, that are going to act as a fifth column, so to speak, within that society. And they're going to have their own martyrs and heroes and representatives that do not forget, right? I mean, look at Northern Ireland, for example, with the DUP and Sinn Féin, and the just complete duality of that society, the complete polarisis between those two points of view. It's like Bosnia also, right? The sort of you'll have these enclaves within enclaves that are not going to forget about their beliefs, their cultures, their viewpoints. This is where I think it's quite a powerful motif. I want the grave to be kept by someone, or tomb, I should say, to be kept by someone. This is why it's actually a very sort of powerful, well kept, quite dramatic tomb. It's by no means a ruin, and as you can see, if you've seen the thumbnail, you'll have already seen it, but if you're watching this video real time, you'll see that there's big giant spaces in the sky for cypress trees. The cypress tree is representative and symbolises death, especially in the Greco-Roman symbolism of the Mediterranean. So, yes, I wanted this to be, like sort of have a chilling, creepy, dreamlike atmosphere with stillness to it, but I also wanted this to be a reminder that just because one side has, for example, excommunicated the heroes of another doesn't mean that they will forget. There's going to be people that remember what that person represented to them, and just because they don't have mainstream support doesn't mean that they don't have support. Now, on to what I'm actually doing, right? Because I sort of I like painting these sort of symbolic pieces, and I think it's really fun. It's just a really fun thing. I get to talk about sort of interesting things. I mean, it's weird because people that I'm friends with will know this. I love to talk about all this sort of thing. It's weird though, in the sense that when you're watching yourself paint and you're sort of narrowing yourself down to a topic, because I just go on tangents after tangents after tangents, but you have to rein it in and actually just talk about the painting and what the painting is, right? But I mean, I'm finding these videos really fun from that perspective, just getting on the microphone and chatting for a little bit about what exactly these paintings really mean to me, but they'll mean something different to you guys and to the viewer as well. Everyone will get something different out of this. Just like when you listen to a piece of music or you read a book, although books are, I think, more difficult to misconstrue meaning in, to be fair, because because of the way that the medium is, books are basically where there's room for abstraction. For example, in the Impressionist writings of like Conrad, and later on with modernist writers like Celine, there is space for abstraction, but realistically, most of the time you need to explore the thoughts and feelings in a profound way, because a book should almost be utilising the storytelling to explore deep concepts and ideas. If it's not doing that, then it's probably failing as a book. And whereas painting, the deep idea is not always as forthcoming. It's not always as obvious. I think a lot of the time, with painting and with music, you can get all sorts of different things happening, can't you? Where people can garner different meanings from different things. But yeah, I mean, right now what I'm doing is I am going in with a palette knife, and I'm just etching in all of these rocks. Now, here's the thing, right? See, with palette knife painting, texture is a lot of what actually creates the detail. Usually, and oftentimes still is the case, when you're painting something, it's contrast of colour that actually creates the three-dimensionality. We've explored that in the past. But a lot of the time with palette knife painting, although that is a factor, okay, it's not the only factor, because texture also, like, in a way, see, when you texture paint, it catches the light in certain ways. As in, I mean, like, the lighting within the room, and it actually, in a way, allows you to maybe sometimes underutilize colour to create a desired effect. Also, when you're painting something like this, a toneless painting with very low chroma, a lot of the time you really do not want strong colours, in your rocks. You just don't want that. You want everything to be very toned back. This is where I think, palette knife painting has its place. I think most people, when they think of palette knife painting, especially when it comes to rocks and mountains, they think of Bill Alexander, Bob Ross, these sort of painters where it's very high contrast. And the way you would do that, let's say if you were painting a giant dramatic mountain landscape, if you were to do that with a palette knife, what you would do is you would put in a middle tone, just like you would with a regular brush type approach. You would put in a middle tone, for example, let's say a middling grey, and then you would then, wait till it dried, preferably, or at least if you're oil painting, have a very thin layer of paint, because you don't want to become like a muddy cake. With oil painting, you run that risk where it all amalgamates and it just becomes a big sloppy mess. If you were doing it with acrylic, you could just wait until it dried. And so then you would go in with a darker grey, and then a lighter, even maybe white, to have maybe like snow or whatever. And you would put your highlight side on one side and your darker colours on the other side, and you would let the paint break. And so that's what creates all the texture, is that breaking of the paint. And so then you're utilising three tones. You get even deeper than that. I mean, and obviously there's ways to approach things. Every painting's different, and it depends what you're going for, but that's the basic approach. And a lot of the time it's actually the contrast of those colours that really makes it pop and makes it work. Something like this, though, you can see that actually, I mean, I'm utilising the same approach. Like my sort of, it's just a very, very darker, three colours. What would the word, like the middle tone is darker, and therefore everything else is darker, and so the highlights are actually more probably what would be a traditional grey that you would use for your middle tone, and the darks are almost completely jet black, but they're still grey. They're not ivory black or anything, but they are close to black. And this creates a moody, abstract atmosphere. I think it's very, very fun utilising texture in painting, I think, and it's also very, very fun to utilise acrylics for this. This was a giant surprise for me. I mean, I've said in previous episodes, for years I genuinely thought that oil painting, you could really only do textured painting with oil painting. Really, it's been the advent of this channel and me utilising this channel as a place to explore, painting more detailed scenes in a shorter amount of time. That has actually created me sort of out of necessity moving to acrylic, but then actually realising how incredible acrylic is, and then you know actually just, oh my god, like you can do all of this stuff that I actually never really thought was possible with acrylic paint. It's crazy. It's a totally different world, because you can just you really can just do so much detail in such a short amount of time. You know, because you can essentially just do something, go for a 10-20 minute break, come back and then do something again and again and again, and you're just able to do this fantastic layering, and I love it. And this is entirely acrylic again. I've not got an oil layer this time. With my previous tomb video, episode 15, you'll see that I waited and added an oil layer, that big thick blue ethereal mist that I added at the very end. This time I did not do that. This is all acrylic, and it was a fun one to paint. It was an interesting one to paint. Didn't what would be the word, like, didn't feel as much of a drawn out process as last week. I think last week it really felt very long. This time it was actually fine. It was quite a comfortable experience actually painting this. You know, it wasn't very stressful. You know, the tomb itself was most definitely, you know, a bit tense, but of course any detail work's going to be. I actually have bought myself these really cool little brushes. I bought myself a pack of them years ago for oil painting, and I utilise them sometimes, but I really feel like they're becoming a lot more useful with my acrylic painting, so I bought another set just to use with acrylic paints, because obviously you need to segregate your brushes. You can't use oil paint and acrylic paint with the same brushes. It doesn't work like it. It's the change of mediums does not lend itself well to healthy brushes and good painting results. So I bought another pack. They're only like £3 on Amazon or something. See if you just type in fine detail brushes, and you know, I think a lot of people use them for painting like World of Warcraft pieces or whatever. That's not my thing, but I think that's what a lot of people use them for. They're tiny, and you know, they're really great for fine detail. So I think if you're doing, you know, more like sort of like stuff like this, where you're essentially sort of going off like a sketch that you've done, and you've got everything sort of pre-planned and this sort of thing, I think it's definitely better to maybe approach things a bit cleaner, a bit more precise with fine detail brushes. You know, they're really cool. You should check them out. Just type in fine detail brushes into Amazon, and you know, these little black things will come up with sort of weird handles, and get yourself a pack and, you know, explore using them in this way. They're very cool. Another thing that I'll say is yeah, I mean, when it came to, you know, adding details to the tomb, yeah, I mean, like, they were really handy. I think what's going to come is this in a way, this painting was almost sort of experiment, a bit of a practice session for pretty big works that are to come, that are in the woodwork. I'm planning a very big Greco-Roman scene, maybe in the future. I honestly don't know what that's going to look like. Yeah, I've not sketched it or anything. It's probably going to be more Hudson River School-esque, you know, Thomas Cole maybe inspired or something like that. But I'll probably take it in a maybe more symbolist direction. Maybe use the, you know, compositional motif of maybe a Thomas Cole work, but then, you know, most definitely utilize a lot of the sort of chroma, colour and mood of, say, a symbolist work. Don't know yet. Not decided anything, major yet. Not decided anything for definite yet. But I think this a sort of painting of tombs and Greco-Roman architecture and little statues and stuff like that is good practice, and using the fine detail brushes is good practice for what's coming next, which is, bigger, bolder compositional scenes with lots of architecture and different things like that. Who knows? I don't know. Or I could do the exact opposite. I mean, next week, I could decide, something, I want to do a waterfall, and then end up doing that, I don't know. Go back to complete nature without any human architecture in it at all. Because, that also, is really close to my heart. Doing paintings like that are just pure landscape without any architectural motifs whatsoever. So who knows? I've got a few ideas cooking. I think it's really fun doing one painting a week for this channel, because it forces you to consistently think of something to paint, and that is so important. I think really forcing yourself to actually just put yourself in a creative space and think of something. Just go and do it. Go and think of something. And this is something, I've got tons of song ideas as well that I need to get out. It's because I'm working on so many self-published works at the moment, which will be coming imminently. I'm going to be once I actually get the one that I'm working on right now out there, I'm going to be sort of advertising on YouTube and different things. Working on a ginormous historical collection of folk music. So I'm really excited to get that out. I shall be discussing that when it happens. But I won't get ahead of myself. I'm 900 pages in, so I'm not, it's going to be a big book. It's obviously a reference book. You're not really meant to read it from cover to cover, although as a kid I used to read encyclopedias from cover to cover. I was a huge non-fiction fan. Obviously I'm a historian. I went to get my master's in history. Not that matters. I've not, what would the word like? I don't really think academia equals intellect. I don't believe that going to get a degree really matters, especially now. But I adore history. I'm very passionate about not just history, but pretty much every single non-fiction topic. I just feel it all intertwines, and there's such a I just love it. It makes me really happy to read about things like that. So, I read encyclopedias from cover to cover, or at least I used to. But that's the thing, like, it's not for everyone. But some people love it. Some people will. But it's more of a reference book. So, you'll pick it up and you'll go to page 245 and read about one song and its history and the chordal progressions that go with it historically, and it's going to be cool. I'll advertise it closer to the time. So here's the thing. Let me talk about what I'm doing right now with the waves. Okay, so with waves, you're almost painting water mountains, or at least that's how I think of it. You want to get that three-dimensionality by creating these big contrasts in colour and light. And I just absolutely adore an off-greenish, yellowish seafoam colour with my waves. I just love it. I just can't get enough of that colour. It just makes me... I don't know, the colour does something for me. It's very ethereal. especially in this sort of dreamy setting where, you know, it's you're like, oh wow, like, I don't know, it just goes with everything, with the moon. But as you can see, where the moon is sort of hitting, the light is coming down and hitting the waves and making them a bit more sort of transparent and sea foam colour, instead of the blues and the darks that you're getting, you know, more down near the horizon line. Now, you know, a lot of sea stuff I just think is trial and error. You're creating these big massive crashes and waves and, you know, contrast in that way, you know, to create those big clouds, almost like sea clouds, where, you know, the sea's crashing onto the rocks. You essentially just want to use, you know, again, dark colour, like a dark grey or a dark off turquoise or whatever, and then add in brighter colours and amalgamate them so that it creates that sort of 3D effect, you know. Blend it out a little bit, and Bob's your uncle, you've got these big, powerful crashes. When it comes to the composition of the wave, obviously you want to sort of have big rolling, powerful, dramatic waves. I mean, it depends on the scene, of course, but essentially you're a lot of the time just creating the contrast of colour makes the sort of waves rise and fall, right? I had to change this composition, so I was like, because this was all ad-libbed, so I was just like, I don't know what I'm going to do for the waves, I'm just going to sort of come up with an idea when I get there. And then I was looking at it and I was going, what happens if I just made that one big wave? So do you know where, see how you've got the middle bit crashing into the rocks, and then you've got the big bit at the front crashing into the rocks? At first I was like, yeah, that's cool and everything, but then I just decided, fuck it, I'm going to make a giant wave, and it's all going to be like one big, you know, crashing wave, and then I'm going to sort of add some sea foam in at the bottom of that big giant wave and sort of make it just one big whooshing movement of water. And I feel like that worked out pretty well. I think that was probably the right decision compositionally, just to make that one big bit of water instead of two different bits of water, because yeah, I don't know, I feel like it worked more. Pretty happy with that. And then as you can see where the middle bit is, where I'm painting now, where there's a big bit of white that's sort of creating that whooshing of the wave coming back and stuff. Then you start painting these little mountains in your blue water area to create sort of like three-dimensionality in the water. You know, so you can imagine the waves going back and forth and sort of rocking, you know, with your colours. So adding in your lighter blues and your whites and your greens, you know, just to create sort of a three-dimensionality to the water. That is literally all waves are. It's the same concept as pretty much any sort of painting, I think, is you sort of add in a dark colour or your base layer, and then you add in your lighter highlight colours, and then you add in maybe another colour to create a three-dimensionality that's sort of between the two or whatever, you know what I mean? It's all sort of quite similar when you actually get down to it. I'm sorry for looking so horrendously unkept, by the way. See, the problem is I do all these videos in my pyjamas, you know, just to be comfortable. I'm wearing a Wishbone Ash t-shirt. Wishbone Ash, they're a great band, or at least, well, Argus is an incredible album. Argus is their magnum opus, in my opinion, and it's just a phenomenal concept album, one of the best prog albums of the 70s. You know, I do think they started to fall off after, you know, Argus, to be fair. When I got that t-shirt in 2022, I actually went to see Argus in its entirety in Glasgow. It was really, really awesome. It was good fun. Really good gig. But yeah. yeah, you're essentially just sort of, see how I've now added like another sort of white bit, and just to create another separation in that blue area. That's just again, like sort of making the water move a bit more. Do you know what I mean? Like, so that it all looks like it's ebbing and flowing and rising and crashing, and and it just creates this excitement, this drama in the water, this movement. It's good fun. If I was to give advice to someone trying to approach water for the first time, I think the advice I'd give them is just relax. But that's pretty much that's pretty much the gist of the advice that I'd give to every single painter in every setting, is just chill out, just relax, just go for it. It's gonna be fine. It's gonna work out. But I know that's not what a lot of people want to hear. Like, they want to hear something a bit more concrete than that. I think, obviously, I would, if I was to ever teach someone how to paint, if someone ever asked me, teach me how to paint, I think I'd probably just watch them in real time and saw how they approach things. What I'd do is I'd show them in real time me painting, explain everything in minute detail to them so that they understood exactly what I was doing. Then I'd watch them, and then I would go, here's what I would do, like, what are you struggling with, and then here's what I would do to sort of solve that, if move them in direction in that way. I think it very much depends on how you think about things, doesn't it? Like, because everyone's mind is different. You need to almost tailor your teaching approaches to the way someone's mind works. It's certainly that way with music. Like, some people think, see, when they learn music, because I'm a musician again, like, obviously I know, like, I've talked about that on this channel, there's music on my channel. See when you're teaching people how to make music or whatever, a lot of people, they'll approach it by learning songs, like, I want to learn Black Sabbath, Megalomania, and then they'll go and they'll learn that riff, and then that'll be them, and then they'll sort of maybe start picking out, eventually, once they become very, very sort of good and they want to make original stuff, they'll start to pick out ideas and concepts and motifs that are being utilised by their favourite players, and then there's another camp of people, and I'm not saying the two are mutually exclusive, because there is a middle point that everybody has to reach, where like, you have to sort of use the two approaches, but then there's another camp of people that sort of want to learn the building blocks of the concepts and techniques of how these people created these things in the first place. It's very much like someone sort of almost saying, teach me how to paint a rock, versus the concept behind a rock, how it's painted. Like, because someone going, teach me how to paint a rock, what they're looking for is sort of a schema that they can put in their heads, where they can go, this is what a rock shape is, this is the colours that I can use for a rock, how do I make those colours, how am I gonna capture the essence of a rock that I see outside by utilising these colours and these shapes. And then there's people that go, no, I want to learn the concept behind how the rock is formed in terms of colour theory, like in terms of use of contrast, to create three-dimensionality that will then lend me to, almost create rocks without even trying. Like, it's, I hope I'm making sense. Like, I know that sort of almost seems really silly, like, and sounds like a very odd way to put it. It's the same with music in the sense that, for example, you can learn the Smoke on the Water riff and play Smoke on the Water, and that's all very well and good. Maybe eventually, once you start, learning how to do these things, eventually you will get to the stage where you can actually start piecing together how these riffs are being made by just playing a whole bunch of other musicians' stuff, and then you can create your own. But you run the risk of basically almost just not copying, copying and not actually being able to create anything original. All art borrows from other things. There's no doubt about that. Like, all art and artists borrow motifs and ideas from other things, from other artists, but add their own slant to it, because it's more actually the either symbolic power or compositional power or colour that really adds the emotion that you want to capture with a piece. Music's the exact same. There's only so many chords to use, there's only so many this, so many that, but it's the emotional intent that really creates the power of what you're trying to do. So eventually when you go to create something original, like, you do run the risk, if you use the first approach of just sort of copying what other people are doing, of almost just panicking a little bit and going, oh, I wasn't almost intellectually prepared for this. Whereas I think the second approach, where you're learning building blocks like scales, for example, or chord theory and music theory and chord progressions and all this stuff, you then can reverse engineer songs that your favourite artists have done. For example, you can listen to a riff and go, I know what they're doing. They're playing A minor scales in this way. This is how I'm gonna then take that motif and utilise it for myself in a cool way. What I think is it's the same with art, it's the same with music. Like, you sort of want to get to a stage where you can see what someone else is doing and reverse engineer it, rather than like taking what someone else is doing and flipping it, if that makes any sense. But then at some point, see, when you learn scales and the sort of second approach of reverse engineering, once you get to that stage, you're still going to have to go and learn songs and look at what other people are doing, eventually, just out of even curiosity's sake, to see how they're approaching certain things. So, it's not an exact science, and teaching people, I think, is very much like just patience and kindness, and what do they want, and what do they really want to get out of music, or what do they want to get out of art or whatever. And it's good fun, isn't it? I mean, art is an incredible way to understand yourself, understand the world, and really utilise your emotions in a powerful way. It's just so much fun. It's so good for you. I really think it's so powerful on a conscious and subconscious level, to be able to create these things, these worlds, these incredible spaces that you can then go into yourself and explore, and it's just so enchanting, Just gonna take a wee drink. Don't mind me. So, talking about reverse engineering, understanding the abstract concept of how to do something rather than actually sort of just seeking out that thing. Here's a good example, right? Okay, I used to rock. Let's take something more complicated, like a castle, or a tomb, or, you know, a classical statue or something like that, right? Which again is something that I am trying to get more experience in and trying to utilise more in my paintings and stuff like that. If I typed in how to paint a tomb, chances are not a lot is going to pop up, to be honest, right? Like there's what type of tomb, right? It could be megalithic, it could be like a cairn, a chambered cairn, or it could be, you know, a Greco-Roman tomb, or it could be like an Etruscan cave tomb, or it could be, you know, God knows what, right? It could be anything. It could be a pyramid, it could be the Taj Mahal. So it's like, what you actually want to do is you want to paint something in your mind's eye, right? Like you want to paint something that has been conjured up by you in an emotive way, or some sort of scene that you then want to. For example, you've seen maybe a cool Victorian tomb in Edinburgh, and you want to utilise that in a painting, but in a different setting, like on an island or something, or whatever it is, or, you know, you want to put that in a different location, like, you know, to make it a creative endeavour for you, where you're creating a landscape or whatever it is. You know, it's very difficult to go how to paint this and then find results that are really going to be satisfactory to you. Whereas if you learn the abstract method of just utilising colour and three-dimensionality to create something, you're going to have a far easier time, because then you're basically just going to go, oh well, I just do this, as in, you know, I just utilise these colours in a way, in this way, and then it's going to all happen. It's going to create this three-dimensional shape. You know, obviously, we all learn till we die. It doesn't really matter how good or bad you are at something. There's always going to be something that you're weaker at than stronger. I've been a guitar player now for ages. I've been in, you know, quite a few bands. I've been in quite a few live scenarios. I've made quite a lot of my own music. I'm gonna make more music in the future. I'm quite an experienced guitar player. I'm pretty decent at it. But everyone has strong suits and weak points in their playing. You know, you can be very confident in one genre and not in the other. And of course that only makes sense in the sense that you're going to follow your heart and what your emotional intent is. Like a lot of the time, like for example, say a metal player or whatever, like you can be great in that genre because that's what your emotions lended themselves to. Like, you know, you were angry, or you were you had dark thoughts as a kid or whatever, and so you sought out this extreme musical form to express yourself, and that's why you became good at that, because you started to learn those motifs and those complexities and intricacies of that genre, and now you're good at that because you've utilised that in a way. Now you have experience under your belt. Whereas, and then so if you told that metal guy to play bluegrass, he would probably be lost and go, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to do that, man. Fuck you. Whereas a lot of the time the bluegrass guy, you know, he'll play in the key of G as a standard. He could play in open tuning. A lot of the time what bluegrass people do is they learn runs that will then, marry up to all the chord changes. So, for example, like A, E, D, or, G, C, F, whatever it is, right? And they will learn those runs, and so they can then, utilize them in multiple songs as soon as that progression comes up. It's a very, very cool way to play. That doesn't lend itself to metal though, right? So it's totally different. It's totally different. Like it just depends on what you want to do. So painting's the exact same, isn't it? You get to a stage where you're gonna be sort of getting good and honing your skills and sharpening your skills for things that you want to do. Like see for example, like Ferdinand Keller, right? The guy that we explored last week. He was obviously heavily inspired by Böcklin, right? Böcklin in turn was obviously heavily inspired by the Romantics, I think. And then obviously, you have the passing down of knowledge from philosophers to philosophers. For example, Plato coming up with the allegory of Plato's cave because of the death of Socrates, right? And him watching how society turned on him. So it's all building blocks. You're constantly building on the knowledge and the utilization of interesting concepts from others, and that tends to be how schools are formed. When I say schools, I mean, like, for example, the Hudson River School, pre-Raphaelites, this sort of thing, right? Motifs like genres, movements, the Romantic movement, they're building upon almost like a collective identity as well, right? Like a sort of, this is what we're doing and this is why we're doing it. The Romantics were rebelling against the rationality and encroaching empiricism and reductionism of modern life, and rebelling against that and going back to what they saw as a more idealized, emotionally powerful human time, with where passions and where humans were actually allowed to be more human. I think that's really interestingly a point that Spengler brings up in his book Decline of the West. I know that's a very controversial book for some, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what side of the political spectrum you're on or any of these things, you should still seek out intriguing ideas wherever you find them, and you can even change them and adapt them, just like art, just like we're talking about, right? Like, just because you don't agree with several aspects of, for example, what Spengler said, doesn't mean that you can't understand one of his concepts and agree with it and change it and adapt it to then suit your personal philosophies. And also, a lot of the time, of course, you come up with personal philosophies organically and then actually end up finding that other people have come to the same conclusions from different areas, or vice versa, and sort of they've actually come to the same conclusions, but they're utilizing it differently in a way, in like a different ideology from you. A bit like, how communists and fascists both hated democracy, in a way. and both hated capitalism. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is what's really fascinating is what Spengler actually writes in Decline of the West, and Man in Technics, which is another interesting philosophical treatise that he wrote. He writes that society is essentially taking us into more and more unnatural ways of life. And I feel like the Romantics and later the Symbolists, like I was talking about last week, really truly embody that in the artistic sphere. They really do, that you can feel that they're frustrated at that. Like, they want to go back to a time where, human passion is more easily conveyed. It's really interesting because, seeing a way, we're seeing that again. It's only gotten worse, and it's only going to get worse from here. With the advent of artificial intelligence, with social media, all of these things, human beings are becoming more and more ensnared, entrapped in artificial ways of life where they don't go outside, they don't hunt their own food, they don't, they're tied to artificial timings, their circadian rhythms are all, goofed. And technology obviously can bring you some incredible things, we literally have a whole library of Alexandria essentially at our fingertips, but much like when you look at Nietzsche and John Stuart Mill and all of these incredible thinkers, a lot of the time too much knowledge actually is what causes you to have a breakdown, right? You can know too much, and when you know something you can't unknow it, and so a lot of the time these people end up, it's like the forbidden fruit of knowledge. Once you take a bite, you lose your innocence forever. It's gone. You're not going to get it back. And this is interesting because obviously social media at worst, which I'd say is what the majority of people end up doing on it, is they doom scroll, they get depressed because they compare their own lives to the artificial projections of other people's lives, and then they get depressed at the fact that they're not living these incredible lives other folk are living, and they get all in their heads about it, and they end up, getting into this cycle of depression and also narcissism, because there's so much rampant narcissism on social media now where everybody is, just so self-absorbed in their own bubble. But then that's the worst scenario, where you become addicted to the horrible sort of dopamine, cortisol spiking that social media gives you, and pornography, as an extension of that, in the technological sense, the encroachment of technology in society. But at the very best scenario, you're utilising all of this technology to learn things, to delve into new art, new literature, new ideas. You're exploring these incredible concepts every single day, and you're utilising it to better yourself. But here's the thing: even that is nefarious in a way. Even that will probably eventually lead you to a breakdown. It's a dangerous, dangerous thing we have chosen. It's a very, very, and obviously every single one of us is here for it, right? We're all utilising it. And there's no escaping it. It's not like, in a way, there is no escape. There's no turning back. It doesn't matter how much you try and bury your head in the sand about this. I'm a very rural type of guy. I'm a country bumpkin through and through. I have chickens. I have, I live out in nature. Go rocking every week. You know, I get, you know, I've always preferred rural life to city life, that sort of thing. And but you know, even if you became completely self-sustainable, went out, got a small holding, lived completely entirely off your land, blah blah blah, you still, you know, eventually would have society catch up with you, right? There's no escape, like, and this is where, you know, like, I feel like this whole escapism of people almost like, oh, I can't change anything, so I'm just gonna go and live out in the woods. That shit's not gonna work. If you want stuff to change, you should probably get a bit more vocal about it, because, and I know this is the problem, we're all trapped in scenarios a lot of the time that we don't want to be in. There's not a lot we can do about it. I don't know, it's very complicated, and a lot of the time it's very depressing. Sometimes it's not. I think you can be pessimistic on a societal level but very optimistic about your own life and still not get down about it, and still, you know, have faith and hope in your own life. And I think that's very important to have. Like, you need to keep on aspiring to be your best self and be positive about your own life. I feel like that is very, very important. But yeah, as you can see, just to change topic back to, you know, the painting, this tomb, again, contrast. That's what creates this. So I'll just contrast. A little note that I think is really interesting to both myself and to hopefully you guys watching this, if you've made it this far, is that that grey, it looks grey. That grey that I'm utilising is actually like almost all, like a good half of it is actually neutral raw umber. I mean, I pretty much use umber in everything because it just tones every colour down and makes things look more natural. But I actually talked about this last week when I was painting the tomb of the crestfallen king. I thought that, you know, if you're going for maybe a more marble colour, it would be best to avoid umber for the most part. But actually, no, that's actually not quite the case. You know, I'd say utilise your umber in pretty much every single grey that you have. Just do it anyway, you know, honestly. I think it just, for the most part, it just always works out better. So, you know, because it just sort of warms everything up a little bit, without being too sort of garish. You know, adding neutral umber to things, raw umber, just allows everything to have a sort of warmth, so it doesn't look too sort of too saturated, you know, too like out the tube almost, you know. So yeah, right now, see where I'm adding in all this sort of black foliage, this mysterious, you know, these plants and trees and God knows what else is in there. It's all just straight grey, straight Payne's grey for now. I'm gonna obviously then wait till it's dry, and then I'm gonna add in highlights or very muted greens. Over on the left side of the canvas, I'm going to be adding in, you know, sort of maybe more little sort of lilacs and purples. You know, I find that's like a really beautiful colour, but it's also like in a way a bit of a haunting colour. So I'm utilising that as well. You know, but yeah, man, see all this finicky work where you're having to sort of like go around these details that you've done, like, you know, tombs and gods. It's like, that's where the stress comes in. That is where the stress comes in when you're doing stuff like this, for sure. But it paid off, you know. Like it was, you know, I was quite happy with the end result of this, to be fair. You know, but sometimes you really do just have to buckle yourself up for the ride and go, this is going to take me hours, but it's okay, it's fine, I'm just going to do it because I'm going to be happy when it's done, I'm going to be proud when it's done, and just do it. This is why, by the way, we've talked about this on this channel before, multiple times. I cannot stress this enough. Get your composition right before you put paint on the canvas. It's just so important. Like, you need to, where I'm guilty for not doing this. You know, I've been guilty in the past for not doing this. But like, you need to do it. You need to put your paint on the canvas precisely. Like, you know, if you're putting, yeah, okay. See, for example, down there where I was talking about ad-libbing the waves. Yeah, that's fair enough. Like, you know, but I knew vaguely where they were going to go and what they were going to be. You know, ad-libbing how you're doing it is not ad-libbing where you're putting it, in a way, because a lot of the time your composition has to be right for the painting to have an impact. I've learnt this the hard way. You know, I've explained this before when it comes to the Bill Alexander and Bob Ross thing, where, you know, they come out with a canvas and they go, you know, oh, just put a happy little tree here, and I'll, you know, get the fan brush and blast in a tree and all this sort of stuff, fire in with paint here and fire in with paint there. That's all for show. You know, I can guarantee you that Bill Alexander and Bob Ross, they knew what they were doing beforehand. They had planned it all and pre-rehearsed it. They knew exactly what the composition of their painting was going to be. Then they decided to do that to add a little bit of gravitas and a little bit of shade, you know, a little bit of sort of show business to the whole thing, to excite people and to keep people interested in what they were doing. And it's awesome, and it worked for them both very successful. Was it PBS that they were both on? Anyway, here's the thing, right? If you're learning how to paint from that, and obviously as a self-taught painter at first, that's exactly what I was doing. I was looking at people like that and going, they're just going in and making it up as they go along. I don't think so. No, that's certainly not what you want to be doing. I don't think if you want to, you know, not stress yourself out and quit early, because that's a lot of the time what's going to end up happening, is you're gonna just stress yourself out by doing stuff like that. What I think is a lot better and a far healthier approach is just to plan what you're gonna do. Just a simple sketch. That's all it needs to be. It only needs to be just a simple sketch that could save you so much bollock. To put it bluntly, you know, to you know, like it's just gonna save you so much like stress, because there's no worse feeling than doing something right in a painting. For example, let's say you do the moon right and you're really pleased and proud of the moon, and you go, oh, that looks great, I'm happy with that. And then you go, what the hell do I do now? And you have no clue. You know, you don't know what to do. You're like, shit, like, I don't know where I'm going with this. Like, what do I add now? Like, what, you know, what is there to add? Like, I don't know where I'm going with this. Like, yeah, there's no worse feeling than that. No worse feeling. Because you'll end up mucking it all up, and then the moon might be good, but everything else is bad. So, how do we resolve that? I've learnt the hard way. Sketch your composition first, right? Let yourself get frustrated at the composition stage before anything's even happened, before anything's even touched the canvas. This is why I always tone my canvas brown, tone it with a burnt umber or a raw umber, and then sketch a graphite sketch over it. It doesn't have to be complicated, just any sort of sketch that will then help you know where to put paint. Do you know what I mean? And trust me on this, you will be happier with the result. I just cannot stress this enough. If you're going to do any creative endeavour, you need to have some vague idea of what you're doing. It's like music as well. Going back to a music example, right? Like, here's the thing, right? See, when you're doing a 12-bar blues jam, right? Like going back to like Cream, early 60s psychedelic music, Cream, you know, when you're doing like, you know, Spoonful Live, you know what I mean? You know, I used to do that in Glasgow, freaking jam nights, and, you know, Aberdeen jam nights and all this, you know, and you're making it up as you go along. Obviously you're not going in and you're not playing Eric Clapton's Solo, for example, from start to finish because you've memorised it. I mean, some people do that, but that's not what most people do on jam nights. They jam and they make things up as they go along, but it has to be within the framework of something, right? If it's not within the framework of something, then it's gonna look sort of strange, or sound strange, sorry, in the musical context. So basically your framework should be sort of driving home you know, like what you're gonna do at the ad-libbing stage. Like, for example, see with the waves, the framework was there for me to ad-lib the waves, because, you know, like, see, just like in a 12-bar blues jam, you go, it's solo time, so the soloist, the guitar soloist, knows that it's the guitar solo time, and everyone else knows, so they know what to do. The bass might stop being a bit busier, and the drums might lay back a little bit to let the guitar shine, right? They all know what's going to happen, because that's the framework. But the guitar might be made up, you know, at the time, but the framework isn't. The framework is there. So that is what is happening with this, right? The waves might be made up at the time. They, you know, I might decide to make artistic decisions at the time while doing the waves or while doing the moon or whatever it is, but at least I know where it's going to be. At least I have a framework to do that. If I didn't have a framework, then it would be panic mode, basically. You'd end up going, what the fuck is going on here? Like, do you know what I mean? I shouldn't swear on these, but, you know, you'd end up basically going like, you know, no, I've just painted, you know, this great mountain, for example, but now I'm going to paint a waterfall and it looks awful because I wasn't prepared for where I was going to put it, or what colours I was going to utilise for it, or, you know, how it was going to fit into the composition, and now it's a mess. You don't want to find yourself in that position. So just don't. Just prepare. That is the best thing that you can do in any artistic endeavour. Just prepare in advance. Now, as you can see these big tall cypress trees that I've added in. Yeah, like big ominous black things, you know. this is where I add in the colour, which is just a very muted green. We're talking like, I think it's like, maybe blue, yellow, mostly umber, some grey, some white to make this very muted off green. Really good for toneless stuff, because you don't want this super saturated green, do you? No way. Because it's going to stick out like a sore thumb. It's just going to look bad. Especially since you want most of the focus to be on your tomb, your marble sort of like, like a tomb there, and the moon and the waves. Like, as you can see, the colour is sort of all the light is sort of hitting the tomb and the waves from the moon. So, the trees are almost there to just be big, ominous black shapes, but there still has to be some, colour to them. So you add in this muted, green colour. But here's another thing about texture. Discussing texture before with the mountains and the rocks, or I shouldn't say mountains, the rocks. Texture also with a brush, the way the light hits texture can do a lot of the work for you, I think, personally. So see, when you're painting these big moody, like you're painting cypress trees, for example, a lot of the time, see if you just texture your paint in a way that looks like a tree while keeping the colour almost like non-existent, it's a good way to basically allow the viewer to create the schema in their head of a tree without actually being like, oh, it's a tree, like, like painting it like here's greens and here's browns and this, because a lot of the time, like we've discussed before on this channel, that's not really the reality of what you want to do, both in real life. Like, for example, realistic painting, a lot of the time trees aren't just going to be your stereotypical colours of a tree. And in a stylistic sense, for example, see if you're going for a symbolist or a tonalist look to your paintings, where you want everything to be subdued, dark, ominous, creepy, eerie, whatever. You don't want bright colours. You don't want like these jarring, bright greens of a summer's day, a lot of the time in your creepy, moody compositions. So yeah, you have to sort of get creative with other things in order to, tell the viewer what it is. Texture is one of those things that I think you can really get really creative with. So that's a way to, make interesting, dynamic things happen just with shapes rather than with colour necessarily. And here's the end result. I think it's pretty cool. I'm quite happy with how, the wall turned out, and how the little statue turned out, how the tomb turned out. It'll be good practice moving forward when I do like other tomb like stuff, or classical, sculptures and stuff like this. Yeah, I'm quite happy with how the cypress trees turned out also. So yeah, overall, I think, the emotional intent was definitely achieved, I think, with this. Which is what matters. And yeah, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope that, you found my ramblings in some way entertaining. And I shall see you for episode 17. Please tune in. And thank you, and goodbye.